Hey everyone, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. I hope everyone out there listening is doing wonderful today. On this episode, we have Karen, who had a close encounter with a Sasquatch creature in Montana. What really struck me about this encounter was the duration of the experience. You usually don't hear of an encounter lasting this long, and Karen was able to study the creature for quite some time. This is another experience where it just doesn't make sense why the creature would have been caught out in the open like that and what its intentions truly were. I think sometimes they really do choose to reveal themselves to people, and I think this is what happened to Karen. If you guys can, check out the Sasquatch Theory podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcast. You can also find the channel on Facebook and Instagram, and if you guys want to purchase some merchandise, you'll see a link down below, and you guys can find some really cool products there. Alright guys, with all that being said, let's dive into our next Bigfoot encounter from the state of Montana. All right, Karen, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Karen. If you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the very beginning, please.
Well, my name is Karen Caldwell, and I was born in Topeka, Kansas, and that's where I'm at now. But I was in the Army, and I got contracts around the United States. And I had a contract back in the early 90s to go up and revamp a prisoner of war camp in Missoula, Montana, into a reserve unit for the state of Montana. And that's where my encounters kind of happened. Was I bought a house outside Missoula, in Bonner, Montana, and back in the early 90s, it was really a small town and very, just a lot of mountains and no real stores or anything, just a few houses. So I liked it out there a lot. So, um, and that's where my first encounter was when I decided to travel up in the mountains on a gravel road and check it out for hunting. Because I got I think I shot a elk in my backyard, but Captain Cox, she got a moose up in the mountains, so I was looking to see if there was any mooses around my property. So,
Okay, very good. And what were you doing that day whenever you had the encounter? If you would kind of put me in your shoes and describe everything in full detail, please.
well, my husband was home. I had two toddlers. One was 1 and one was 3, and he was going to watch the kids while I went up. There's a gravel road that goes up into the mountains, and I wanted to explore it to see if I could see any wildlife up there or, for hunting, because I was into hunting when I was younger. I don't do it now, but um, so I went up this gravel road that twisted around in the mountains, and I didn't see any mooses, but I just kept traveling, hoping that I wouldn't get stuck because the gravel road was so narrow. Um, I didn't know where it came out at, and I couldn't back up, so I just kept going up the mountain. And the rock, the on my left hand side, it was like straight up, like rocky, and on the right side, it went straight down, but it had trees and rocks and stuff. And I was just going real slow, trying to look through the trees to the left, to see if I could see any wildlife. And um, I came around this curve, and on the side of the road that went down to my right, where I was looking, because the other side was like straight up rocky. I couldn't see anything but rocks and mountain straight up. So I noticed I stopped because I saw this like fur on the side of the road. And I thought, well, is that a dead bear or what is that? So I just stopped my car and I kept looking at it, and the sun shined on it, and it looked brownish, blackish brownish. And I thought, what is that? It was huge patch of fur, down. I figured it was a dead animal. So I just kept looking at it because the sun passed and it turned more blackish brown. And then all of a sudden, this thing stood up. It was huge, and it walked in front of my car, and it was standing right in front of my car. And I was frozen in shock. I had no idea what I was seeing, but it was like a big ape gorilla, but it was a lot bigger than that. And it just stared at me. And this thing's arms were so big. I thought, oh my gosh, this thing could just push me down the mountain. And so I just stared and looked at it, and it stared at me. And this went on for 30 minutes. We were just locked eyes. And it was right in the front of my front bumper. And its eyes were huge, size of a baseball. They were dark and black. And I've never seen anything like it. The arms were huge. It was just huge. And I couldn't tell if it was a male or a female. I couldn't see any genitals, so I figured, oh my gosh, this must be a female. And I don't know. And I thought, oh, okay. And we just stared at each other. It didn't move. I didn't move. And then all of a sudden it turned its head and it took like two big steps and it was gone on the other side. I don't know how it climbed that mountain that went straight up that was nothing but rocks, but all I could see is it turned around and two strides, and it just disappeared up the mountain. And then it was just incredible. And I just went straight down the mountain, got back on the interstate back into Bonner, in between Missoula and Bonner, and I just drove home. I couldn't even tell my husband what I saw. I thought nobody would ever believe me. So until I saw your show or heard your stories on YouTube, I thought, oh my gosh, I did see something. I didn't even know anything about a Sasquatch or anything. Then after that, my husband bought a camper, and I had another experience after that. We tried to take the camper up on the other side of where we lived in Bonner to find some camping grounds up in the mountains. I didn't tell my husband what I saw that day. He would probably think I was a Looney Tune. So we got a flat tire on our camper, and he was changing the tire. The toddlers were asleep in the camper. So I was looking down the mountain at the rail, off the railing, and I saw this big, huge ape-like creature walking across, like that video where they saw the Sasquatch by the ocean or something in the rocks. I could see it just walking, and I go, Jerry, Jerry, come look at this. And he looked over there. He goes, what is that? And I said, I have no idea, but it's as big as the trees. And it was walking on two legs, and its arms were really, really long down to his, almost knee part. And we could see it, but through our binoculars. First, I thought, what is that? And I got my binoculars, and he saw it, and I saw it. And we thought, okay, don't know what that is. So those are my two stories. But the one where it walked right in front of my car was pretty shocking. And I'm really glad I'm finally got validation that I'm not crazy. Other people are seeing them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had the opportunity to see two of these creatures throughout your life.
Right. I'm
Okay.
66 now. And back then I was like in my like 33, 32, 33.
So during the first encounter, the creature stopped in front of your vehicle and it was in place for 30 minutes. Is that correct?
Right. We stared at each other for 30 minutes or longer. I was frozen. It seemed shocked. We just stared at each other. I had no idea what this thing was going to do. I thought it was big enough that it could have flipped my little car over the side of the cliff. You know, that's how scared I was because his arms are really big and long. And I thought, gorillas are strong, but this was bigger than a gorilla. So I had no idea what I was looking at. I was petrified.
Yeah. So the entire time the creature was just frozen in place.
Yes, he was frozen, or she frozen, just standing there staring at me, eye to eye contact, just looking at me like it was scared, like, what are you? And I was looking at it like, what are you? And it went on for 30 minutes. Matter of fact, I thought I was going to piss my pants. I mean, really, I did. I thought, this is crazy. And I just froze. My hands were gripped on the steering wheel so tight that my fingernails were going into my palm. So
Did the creature blink whenever you were staring at it? Could you see it breathing? Did it do anything, or was it just frozen still?
it was frozen. It never blinked. Their eyes never shut.
Yeah.
It just, it, there was no blinking of the eyes. And I don't think I blinked my eyes either at that time. I mean, I was just like, I'm sure I did, but I don't remember. But I know it never shut its eyes. I never saw it shut its eyes at all.
Did you notice anything else
Um,
strange going on during the encounter?
um, it actually, the arms were really, really big and long. I mean, um, and it seemed to move its arms a little bit, but not bending them. It was like moving away from his body and back into his body and away from his body and back in. And that's when I got really scared because his hands were so huge. I mean, they were bigger than the headlights on my car. I mean, his hands were so huge. It was, um, I would say 6 times bigger than a gorilla because I see gorillas in the zoo here, and I've been close to them through the glass, and it was like a fourth of the size of a gorilla. So it was really, really big. Like I said, I had no idea what I saw, and I'm glad after 30 years I can validate that I definitely saw a Sasquatch.
Yeah. And what did you think it was?
At the time, I had no idea. I thought it was something from another world at the time because it was not from this planet because I had no idea anything about a Sasquatch. I said, "What is that?" And then just the way it moved was like unlike any other creature. A gorilla couldn't even gone up that mountain to the left that fast in 2 strides and disappear. Of course, I didn't roll my window down and stick out my head or anything. So,
Yeah.
and it was right at the end of the summer, beginning fall when I saw it because that's when I usually want to go out and see where the wildlife is for hunting. So it was, the end of summer, beginning of fall.
What do you think the creature was doing on the side of the road?
I I don't know. It was hunched down. I think maybe the way I saw, I didn't see anything but fur. I thought it was a dead bear or a bear down there, right on the, right side of my car where the mountain went down. It was right on the edge of the road. I was going slow, looking through the trees, and I saw that fur. And I'm going, what is that? I mean, that's you know, like my whole front seat patch of fur just on the down on the side of the gravel road, and I couldn't see a head or arms or anything. It might have been its back and it curled up. I think I probably scared it after I thought about it for a while, after he heard the noise and hid. And heard my car coming and didn't know I scared it like it scared me because it just was just fur. I saw fur and I just stopped and I thought, what is that? A dead bear? That's the first thing I thought in my mind, because bears don't, they move and they're not too scared of anybody, like that. They don't hide. And this was just like a patch of darkish, blackish brown fur. And I thought maybe someone shot a bear and it died there. And then all of a sudden, I just stopped the car and was looking at it, trying to figure out what the fur was and if it was dead or alive. And it just stood up and walked in front of my car after I stopped. And it was probably about 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. I was staring at this fur, trying to figure out what it was. So I think it was coming up the mountain, heard my car, and was right at the road and just hid, like someone would, like me in the army, would crouch down if they heard something coming that was, an enemy or something, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Why do you think the creature didn't just take off into the woods rather than just walking in front of the vehicle? Do you think maybe it had like a little one nearby?
What it could have, because I mean, it could have had someone close to it somewhere out there, but I have no idea why it just walked right in front of me, in front of my car, and stared at me. But it was very aggressive when it did walk in front of me and stare at me. I mean, it was not going to move, and I was frozen. I mean, I was totally frozen. I had no idea what I was looking at. But it wasn't human and it wasn't any kind of animal on this earth I knew. I thought at first I was seeing maybe an alien or something. I had no idea what this thing was. And I thought, oh, nobody's going to believe this. So I don't know why it stood in front of my car, unless it would, seeing if I was going to do something to it and I was watching it to see if it was going to do something to me because the only thing I was scared of, that thing was so big and the arms were so thick and long that it could have flipped my car right down the mountain. And that's why I didn't move because I figured if I moved, it would get aggressive. So I just froze. I didn't move. I don't even remember blinking, but I'm sure I did. But it didn't blink.
Yeah. So you were
So,
afraid of taking off in the vehicle because the creature could flip you off the mountain?
well, it was right in front of my car and it was huge and my car was small and I didn't want to hit it. I didn't know what I was looking at, and my car would have got damaged hitting something that big. And I didn't know what it was or what it was capable of doing. So I just stayed put and it stood up and walked right in front of my car and we had like a face off for 30 minutes, I would say. I didn't move. It didn't move. And then 20, 30 minutes, it just turned around and in two steps, it was straight up that rocky mountain and disappeared because I thought, where'd it go? And that's when I rolled down my window and looked out, and there was no way. I looked at the side of that mountain. There was no way in two steps that anything human or animal that I even would think couldn't have got up and over that mountain that quick. So I had no idea what I saw
Yeah.
until I started watching YouTube and saw these Sasquatch shows and hearing these stories and I thought, "Oh, I feel better." I feel better. I know what I saw.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And you mentioned the Sasquatch was a blackish brown color and it had black eyes. What did the head look like? Was it round? Was it elongated?
it was elongated. The above the eyes there was quite a bit of fur in it. It wasn't round, it was more elongated. but its face was, yeah, it was like an oval shape, long and, probably, uh, I would say the head was huge. Huge. I mean, bigger than a gorilla. It was huge. And a gorilla is more, it's not the shape of a gorilla's head. It was really wide. I would say at least a foot more wide and probably a foot and a half in length. It was the hugest head I've ever seen. And the eyes were huge, baseball or bigger. They were big, round, black eyes. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it,
So,
it sounds like it.
and and then when I see like shows on TV and stuff, um, I'm sure they have different species of those things. I don't think they have the same species, because like the the only one that came really close to what I saw on YouTube or any other channel was the one that was near rocks and sand by the ocean that someone got a video of. That's the closest thing, but that thing was more brownish looking than the one I saw. Mine was more black than brown.
How tall did you say the
So,
creature was, and how much do you think it weighed?
oh, that thing must have been. I had to look up at it out of my windshield. So my windshield hit pretty much where it was its belt, belt wise on a human. I had to look up to see it. So I would say anywhere between 9 and 12 feet tall. I know that sounds crazy, but that's how big this thing was. It was huge.
Yeah, that sounds like a huge creature. And the second one that you encountered, how far away did you say it was?
That one was far away, but you could tell it was big. And it was what I told my husband. I said, Jerry, look at that. What animal walks on two legs like that? And that's before I knew that's before the encounter I had with the thing in front of my car. We were up, we were taking our RV up in the mountains trying to find this camping spot, and we got a flat tire. So I got out and was looking down the mountains and ran in it. I thought I saw something moving like a bear. And so I ran in the RV, got my binoculars, and looked down, and this thing was walking on two legs. And then I yelled at Jerry to come. He's passed away now, but I told him, I said, you got to come see this. And he got the binoculars and looked. He goes, what the heck? Like, is it? I said, what animal walks on two legs like that? He goes, I have no idea. He says, I'm going to fix the tire. And when we find a place to turn around, we're not camping here, is all he said. So he fixed the tire. We got up the mountain, found a place to turn around, and we went back home because we had two toddlers. There was no way he was going to camp there after seeing what we saw.
Yeah. And how
Because
far away was it from the first encounter?
how far away?
Yeah,
It was
what?
on the it was like we have a mountain ridge, had mountains behind our house, and this one was more um, in between Bonner, Montana, and Helena. So it was on the other side of the highway.
Okay. So the
We were
same
going.
general
We were
area.
going. Yeah, I mean, we were. I'd say maybe 30 miles away from where I saw the other one. Not far, but we were trying to find a place to camp up in the mountains. So it was on the other side of the highway going into Missoula. Outside, there's Missoula and then Bonner. Because I worked in Missoula, and Bonner is, away from Missoula. And then it was like, about 30 minutes from the first sight
Okay.
traveling.
I appreciate you for sharing that. And have you ever had any other strange experiences in your life? I mean, I'm not saying it's connected at all, but have you had like a history of like seeing UFOs, paranormal encounters, shadow people, anything like that?
Well, I am living in a house right now that's in 19 was built in 1932. So there are definitely um well, we got woods behind our house. And when I moved in there was a bunch of metal. So I looked up online, these people that collect metal, and because it was heavy metal back there in the woods. And I had some Hortonville, Kansas. I had this people called up and said, "Yeah, we'll come get it." When they came out of my car, they were an elderly couple, and I asked them. One was like 90, and the other one was 80 something, and they're lifting man and wife. They're lifting this heavy metal, and I looking at them like, "How are you guys doing this at your age?" He goes, "We're cattle farmers." He said that we lift all the time our whole lives. And the lady, I was picking up these rocks by a big rock in my yard. I was newly into this house, so um and she goes, "I wouldn't do that if I was you." And I said, "Why?" And she goes, "Because there's this big, huge black rock, and then coming out from the black rocks, all these little rocks." And told her I'm picking them up for the lawnmower guy. I don't want rocks in my yard like this. So she goes, "But I wouldn't do that if I was you." And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, back in the 30s, you could bury your loved ones on a grave. They call them green graves now." And she goes, "That looks like a green grave to me where someone buried a loved one on their property." And I thought, okay. So I just threw the rocks down. And I said, "Thanks for telling me. I'll just have the lawnmower guy mow around it." And she goes, "Well, you want that?" She goes, "Don't move that big rock." And I said, "I'm not. I'm going to touch it." And that was my first wake up on this house. And then behind the woods, there's this old house, old well, the people said it was a shed, and I went back in there, and it's got windows to the south, and it's got a place where an old stove was in there, and it has a front and a back door. So to me, that wasn't a shed. That's like some old house from the cowboy days. And so about a year later, I was sitting watching TV, and the house is broken up in these weird rooms. Like the front of the house, there's a door to the north, but it's a long, skinny room. And then there's a big room with a fireplace, and then another big room divided off, and then the kitchen to the west, and the skinny rooms to the east. And was sitting there watching TV. And then it was my birthday, I think about 3 years ago. And all of a sudden, this thing walked in the doorway and looked at me. And I don't think it was human, but it was, I don't know what it was, but I could see every detail of it. And then it just came from a window. I don't know how it got in my house. It just walked. I was in shock. I pulled the cover up over my nose and mouth, peeked at it through my eyes. It looked at me, I looked at it, and then it just walked past the doorway, and it took me a half an hour to get up. And the door was locked, and of course it came from the window side. So I don't know how it appeared, but it was had a big long nose, which wasn't human. It was wrinkly. I could see the eyelashes in his eyes and mouth. He had a flat cowboy hat on, which and I could even see his hair coming down past his ears. And he had a jacket that had like double gold, um, solid gold buttons on it. He had a gun holster with a gun, wrinkly pants. I could even see his shoes. There was some kind of boot, low cut boot tied up. But his nose was so big, it was almost like a full size troll type face. You know what I'm saying? I've never seen anything with a nose that big. Nose must have been 6, 7 feet long. I mean, big long nose. So human like, but unhuman like, you know? And then I Googled flat cowboy hats, and they were back in the late 20s, early 30s. You see pictures of Kansas cowboys with the flat hats. But that's the only other experience I had, but that was so real. I talk about it, my son gets upset because he goes, "Don't tell everybody that. They're going to think you're crazy." No, I know what it's all. I mean, I was frozen solid. And I have this friend that rides a motorcycle and lives out at Lake Perry, him and his wife. And they always call me on my birthday. Well, the phone was ringing and ringing and ringing, and I didn't answer it. So, and I was in too much shock to talk to them that they both rode their motorcycles over to check on me on my birthday. So that was kind of. So I told them about it, and they just looked at me and shook their head, and started walking around the property, and said, "Maybe you should get out of this old house." But that's the only thing that's ever happened to me before. Is this house has got its problems as far as. And then I think it was just last month I was watching TV in the living room, and my son does contracts, and in between contracts he comes and visits. So he was in the room I have for him, and I was watching TV in the living room, and up in the top floor there's like all this banging, like somebody's walking up in the attic, you know, above the ceiling. Just stomp, 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 stomp. And I get up and go in there to see if he hears it, and he's sound asleep, so I'm not going to say anything to him. But those are the only two things that happen here. So,
Okay. No, I appreciate you for sharing that with me, and it gives me an idea of the experiences that you've had throughout your life. And, I'm just kind of theorizing, if there's a connection between the paranormal and the cryptid subject. And it's really hard to say because, these are flesh and blood creatures, but at the same time, people can't produce a body. So I'm just wondering.
yeah, I think I don't know, um, there might be something to that, you know, because for me to see that Sasquatch and then come to Kansas and move into a house and 3 years ago have those experiences that made me think, am I just, you know, something about my aura, or something, or am I meant to see these things for what reason? I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder the same thing. It's just strange to see something out of the ordinary like that, whether it's a Bigfoot creature or to experience like paranormal activity in your home.
Oh no, yeah. Yeah, and I did think about that, and I moved like 3 years ago back to Montana, and I got a place in Missoula. But then my brother and left this house to my youngest son, and but my brother lived in Missouri, and he called me up diagnosed with lymph node cancer and only 2 months to live. So I got left Montana and came back to the house here that I left for my son, you know, and went to Missouri to help him get back and forth to chemo. So, but
Yeah.
I did when I moved back to Montana, I did make sure I moved into the city instead of out in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Is he doing better now?
Yeah. No, he passed away last April.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear about that, and I'm sorry to hear about your husband too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he passed away too. So he passed away when the kids were young.
Yeah. Are
So
you in Oklahoma now or in Montana?
I'm in no, I'm in Kansas.
Oh, okay, you're in Kansas. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not too far away from me. That's a good area to be to not experience Bigfoot activity. It's pretty flat there. I mean, at least the center and west part of the state.
Yeah, the only thing I've had in my backyard here is I've seen a wolf, I've seen coyotes, and I did see a black panther in the back of my woods behind my house. Which the only thing that really scared me was the panther. The wolf, you know, the wolf and me were eye to eye.
Mm.
That's another story. I walked out of my house and in right on the edge of the woods, I saw this wolf. And they say that when you see a wolf to stay still. Well, it was looking at me and I was looking at it and it lowered its head. And I thought, okay, don't move, Karen, because it wasn't that far away from me. I would say, uh, uh, I'd say maybe 25 yards. So I stood still. It stood still and then it started lowering its head, and its head was lowered real low, and it stared at me and I stared at it. And then that went on for about 15 minutes. We stared at each other and then it just slowly turned around and went back in my woods. Okay. Now I can go in the house. So,
Yeah. Well, if you're
uh,
encountering animals like that, maybe there's Sasquatch around.
really?
No, I'm just saying if you've seen cats and wolves, I mean, if it can support animals like that, maybe you'll see a Bigfoot again.
You never know. I probably would if I went back to Montana for sure. If I went back up in those mountains, I'm sure I'd see something again. Because that area in Bonner. Now, I did go visit up there not long ago. A couple of years ago. Like I said, I moved up there, but I had to move back because I had to help my brother before he passed away. But when I moved up there, I was thinking about going. I moved in the city, but I was thinking about going back. And I did drive back into Bonner, but at the time, just a couple of years ago when I was in Montana and drove back to Bonner, it's grown up a lot compared to what it was in like 92. So it's more populated. Like the gravel road I went by my old house, which is the same, except the gravel road to my house has train tracks along one side of it. So they move trains into that area. So it's gotten a lot bigger if there's train tracks and there's more buildings and there's a store and a restaurant and different stuff like that there wasn't there before. It's like excuse me, it's like Missoula kind of extended the city wise all the way through into the Bonner, because it used to be you left Bonner to drive to back in the 90s, you would leave Bonner, which is only like maybe 10 houses at the most, and one little grocery store, not even a gas station. So you would leave Bonner and go to Missoula and there was nothing. But now if you're in Missoula and you go to Bonner, it's just stuff all along that highway. And then when you take the dirt road into where my house was by in the mountains, it's got train tracks across the dirt road. So that tells you that it's really, you know, that area is not grown up. But I did go to my old house and I noticed that behind my whole house is still not grown up. There's no houses up in the mountains there. So I know that gravel road still goes up into that area. But I didn't go that time. I thought, nope, not going back up there.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I
I just
understand that.
didn't.
Okay.
because I felt lucky that my experience was not where this thing flipped my car over the mountain.
Yeah, that would have been worst case scenario.
Yes, yes. But thanks for letting me tell my story.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you for getting in contact with me and sharing your encounters openly on the channel.
Okay. Well, you have a good day.
Yeah, you too, and you take care. And if you encounter anything else in the future, feel free to reach back out to me.
Oh, I will. I plan on moving back to Montana. I really love it up there, but I just don't know if I could handle being where I would like to be is in the mountains, but just don't know if I could do that after what happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I understand that. All right. Well, you have yourself an excellent day and you take care, okay?
okay, you too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right, Karen, thank you very much for sharing your Bigfoot encounter with me. And I am sure it was a terrifying experience, especially since you're way up on the mountain and this creature could have just pushed you off down into the ravine, never to be seen again. We often hear these strange reports where somebody went missing and no one can figure out what happened to them. And you just never know if they ran into a cryptid creature. A lot of times people go missing or they find missing bodies and they can never figure out what happened to that person. It's better to be safe than sorry, and of course this is just a theory. You just never know if someone ran into one of these things and things went south. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for listening. If you guys can, like the podcast, subscribe to the channel, and I appreciate everyone for listening. Take care and be safe out there in the forest.